Welcome to the Default Profitable Podcast. You're listening to the next episode. Today, we're going to focus on what it takes to start, run, and grow a passion business. I'm your host, Matt Nettleton, and today my guest is Jason Barnaby. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So why don't we take 2 or 3 minutes? I always try to figure out, when did I meet this person? And I really don't have any idea, but it's been a while. So I kind of know you. But why don't you do this? Why don't you take 2 or 3 minutes, introduce yourself as a person before we start talking about your business?
Sure. I tell people when I do keynotes that I've lived a lot of life in the life I live. So I was a ski bum in Colorado after college for a couple of years. That got me back to Indiana again. I somehow always wound up back in the Midwest. Went on a short-term mission trip and fell in love with one of our translators. So I moved to Poland about a year later, was married almost a year to the day that we met, lived in Poland for 8 years. While there, I got a master's degree in teaching English as a foreign language. My wife and I opened a coffee shop in Poland, biggest disaster ever. Had that for a year and was a college professor for 5 years in southern Poland. We lived there total for 8 years. We have 3 children. 2 of them were born in Poland. 1 was born here. And then came back to the States and got a job teaching and quickly realized that teaching here doesn't pay what it does in Europe. And literally fumbled into a job as a training facilitator, which is basically like being a teacher without the pain in the butt kids and parents. And that led to learning company culture and what a company does. And then I got bored and told my boss I was bored. And she said, well, try sales. And I was like, cool. So I did and was in that role for several years. And then my job was eliminated. And 7.5 years ago, I founded Firestarters Inc. And as our mutual friend Brian Neal says, I may not necessarily be the best at what I do. I just don't quit. So
that is the key.
I think you're right. Well, I'm sure we'll talk
being
about
successful. Yeah. So what was it? You say you stumbled in, but what was it that drove you to start the Firestarter business? And what does the business do?
So what drove me to start is I could see the writing on the wall that my job was going to be eliminated. Saw that coming about a year before, and ironically, as things tend to happen, about 1.5 years before, my daughter was on her way to jump on the trampoline in the backyard. She was 8 at the time, and she just looked at me out of the clear blue sky and said, "Daddy, do you like your job?" And I was like, damn, I thought I was hiding it better than that. So I gave her some, adult response, benefits and, whatever it was that I said. And I tried to dumb it down and make it quick. And I said, does that make sense? And she looked up at me and she kind of looked at the ceiling and she goes, yeah, I guess. And then she shrugged her shoulders and said, I think you still need a new job, and ran out to bounce on the trampoline. So when my job was eliminated, I have wanted to start my own business since I was in my 20s. I used to have either a spiral bound or a manila folder that said MOB on it, which stood for my own business. And I would clip articles or write things in there when I had a good customer experience or a bad customer service experience. And I knew I wanted to do something. My dad was an entrepreneur. He owned a customer modeling company my entire life growing up. So I was definitely familiar with the feast or famine. When things are great, they're great. When they're not, they're not. And he did the same thing. He just didn't quit and pivoted several times in that business. And I just knew that I was not, after almost a 10-year career in the corporate world, I was tired of having other people tell me how to dress and what to say and what not to say, and spend ridiculous numbers of hours in meetings. And so as I saw it coming, I hired a consultant, somebody who is a mutual. I have several mutual friends, and I had been actually, I was told by a friend of mine. She said, "You're not ready to meet this person yet, but when you are, it's going to change your life." And her name is Jenny Robbins. I don't know if you know Jenny or not, Matt, but
No.
She's anybody who's doing similar stuff to what I'm doing, what you're doing. Most of us in Indianapolis have probably worked with Jenny. And she helped me put a framework together. And I'll never forget this. We had 3 sessions that I paid for. In the second session, she said, well, there's your framework. And I was just giddy. I was like, I have a framework? What is it? Tell me. And the original framework was find your fire, fan your flame, and tend your tribe. I'm a big believer in Jim Rohn's quote that we're the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So I wanted to include that. I've pivoted that. Still, the first 2 are still the same, but it's find your fire, fan your flame, and ignite your life. And at the beginning was selling leadership development that I wrote. I have a master's in curriculum development. So I was trying to sell that. And again, our mutual friend, Brian Neal, about 3 years ago said, why aren't you doing fractional sales work? And I said, because I don't know what that means. And he said, well, this is what it means. And he said, put an offering together and put it out in the world and see what happens. And so I did that and realized that it was an epiphany for me because I love sales. I love the world of sales. I love the quick nature of sales. I love the creative side of sales. I like that sales will figure it out and they will pivot because it's so important to be able to do that. And I love people development. So what I'm doing with fractional sales is I am taking your sales team and adding to it, maybe getting rid of some people, taking over the day-to-day, taking on the one-on-ones, but then also developing your people. Because I think oftentimes people think about salespeople as like, oh, they've been successful, they don't need any help. And I think salespeople get kind of hung out to dry and left with not a lot of development. So I do that. I do executive coaching as well, and I'm not actively pursuing it right now. I've kind of paused it, but I'm still doing quite a bit of it. I just am not actively pursuing it, and that's keynote speaking, which I absolutely love. I've loved that since I was 13 years old. So,
all right. So normally I would ask, there's a spectrum of reasons that people start a business.
mm-hmm.
And on one end of the spectrum is because they see it's a money opportunity. And on the other end, they see because it's a passion.
Yep.
I think it goes without saying that you're more of a passion than a money opportunity.
Yes, I'm the believer of if you build it, they will come. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm putting that in air quotes. I've built several things that people didn't come for. And so, pivot was one of my favorite words. And, I don't, yeah, you're right. It's a passion thing. And honestly, what that came from was 10 years of riding elevators with people who were miserable. And hearing people who, literally the proverbial, like going down the elevator with their box of stuff from a 30-year career because they're retiring. And I heard this way more times than one. The person's riding down the elevator with their best friend because it's their last elevator ride. And the friend says, well, what are you going to do with all this time? And I heard so many different times people say, I don't know. I guess I got to figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I thought, that's really sad. And, and so I really do hope that people can find that thing. The thing for me is sales. So I like to help people figure that out in the place that I'm in now. But can't tell you how many people I talk to who are like, I just don't know what I want to do. And so I'm hoping to be able to help some of those people figure that out. So definitely passion was a driving thing.
Now when did you officially start Firestarters though? What was the year?
So I registered the business in 2017. And I officially started when my job was eliminated in May of 2018.
Okay. So May of 2018, it becomes a business. Now, the 3 things that everybody keeps talking about when you go to start a business is you got to have 6 months of savings.
Didn't.
A strategic plan.
Didn't.
And a clear understanding of what your customers are going to buy from you.
It was less than murky, but I had a pretty good idea.
So honestly, if you've got one of those three, you're better than like 140 of the 143 businesses I've talked to. Like most everybody's like, well, I didn't really have the money, but it was time to start. I didn't really have a plan that made any sense, or if they had a plan at all. And what I thought I was going to sell is not what people wanted to buy, so I had to change.
Yeah, and I will say to that, I did have a fairly decent severance package, so I knew that I was going to have money coming in regardless for for a set amount of time. Plan wise, I knew the people that I had a strategic plan to go after people and tell them what I was doing and ask for referrals. So, in that way, yeah. What I wanted to sell, I thought from my experience that people would want to sell based on the experience that I had with some of those things. And what I realized was I don't know if you're familiar with predictive index, but I'm a maverick.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a maverick on the predictive index, and I wear that fairly proudly, honestly. But that also means we learn the hard way.
So there's an easy way?
Good God, I hope there's an easier way than what I've done for 7.5 years, because holy crap. But I learned quickly that what I thought the world needed is not what the company was going to pay for.
Yep.
And because of that, the public speaking thing actually started to take off, and I was doing a lot of public speaking, and then COVID, and that just completely wiped me out overnight, honestly.
Yeah. So, which kind of leads us to, and you've alluded to it, but from the day that you opened the door in 2018 to now, what are some of the things that you've had to learn that surprised you?
Honestly, one of the things that has been transformational for me in the last couple of years is I had to learn who I was without apology. I do think that, and I've talked to several people about this in the last several months. I'm 54. I do think that there's something very instrumental in cresting 50. I just, when I was in my 30s, I would say, I don't care what people think, but I still hope you like me. And then in my 40s, I was like, screw you. Like, you're lost if you don't like me. Right. Cause I'm pretty cool. And if you don't like me, and that was turning people off. And I can honestly say that I'm at a place now in my life where I'm like, I honestly, and I really don't, I don't care anymore if you like me or don't like me. I don't. And I've realized that I am not for everybody. And the way that I explain this to people is like, where I live down on the southeast side of Indy, there are 5 pizza places within 10 minutes of my house. Donato's, Pizza Hut, Papa Murphy's, Little Caesars, and Papa John's. It's basically dough, cheese, and sauce with some toppings, right? But Little Caesars people don't go to Donato's, and Donato's people don't go to Papa Murphy's, right?
Right.
So find your people and be who you are unapologetically. And for me, that was one. And then the other thing, because to your point about it being a passion business, I would say for a long time that it was hard to separate Jason from Firestarters and Firestarters from Jason, because it was very personal. So when somebody didn't want my services, I translated that as them not wanting me. And and because I was not boldly, authentically, unapologetically who I am, it took some time to get over that. And now, I'm a huge fan of the podcast Smartless. I don't know if you listen to that podcast at all, but Jason Bateman has said multiple times in that podcast, there's this thing called sexy indifference that he talks about, of this, like, I don't need you. And I feel like I have really found that in the last 2.5 years. And the shift, like, I am getting speaking gigs that I'm not even advertising that I do that. I'm getting people calling me for coaching that I don't even know who they are. I mean, stuff has just come to me because I've stopped holding on so tightly, and I've shown up really authentically as me, unapologetically, and not in a like, pound my chest kind of way, but just, this is who I am. And if you want it, great. And if you don't, I hope you
Also
find what you're
great.
looking for.
Also great. We're
Yeah.
good either
Also
way.
great.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. Just the understanding, and this is something I work with my clients on all the time, that when somebody rejects what you're selling, that it has nothing to do with you
100%
personally.
agree with that.
Personally. Just like
100% agree with that.
that is such a valuable lesson. If you take nothing else but that from your life, it's probably a pretty good lesson.
Yeah.
So when people so the target of the podcast is people who are new or aspiring business owners.
Yep.
Right. I'm sure you had this experience. I certainly have this experience. We live in a city where there are big companies, and every once in a while somebody says, I'm leaving the big company. I'm doing my own thing.
Yep.
What advice do you have for me? So when somebody comes to you and says that, what do you tell them? Where do you start?
Well, honestly, one of the first things that I say, and I wish this would have been said to me when I lost when my position was eliminated, you're gonna go through the grieving process, even if you're leaving on your own terms. And go look up the stages of grief and be aware when you walk through them, because I was walking around for a couple of months just pissed off. And I said that to a friend, and I said, he's like, what's wrong with you? And I said, I'm pissed off all the time. And he goes, well, you're going through the stages of grief. And I was like, what? And I looked him up and I was like, yeah, I sure am. So that's one thing I would say. Number two, like, we are such a go productive culture. Go get quiet for a month. Like, don't jump into the next thing. Get quiet. Meet with people who you know and you respect, and ask them for feedback. I have an exercise that I when people like that come to me, because they do, I give them this. It's my version of a 360 feedback exercise, and get that feedback. And then the third thing that I would say is, and this was said to me by a good friend of mine, if you're going to go out on your own, you have to get over the mentality of a paycheck and not think about things. And this is how much money I have coming in at this time. And I remember I said something to somebody, and I said, I don't have the money. And she said, well, you just need to go sell a keynote, and then you'll have more than enough money. And that was an epiphany for me. And the other thing that I would say is, again, something I've learned from Brian, and that is, when things are going well, because things will go well and things will go poorly. It goes in cycles. When things are going well, don't take your foot off the gas. Don't get complacent. Don't rest. Like, when things are going well, that's when you should start saying, hey, I'm really busy. I would love to get you slotted in for 6 months from now.
Yeah.
Don't wait for 6 months to go, hey, I could really use some new business. Yeah. And then I would say the last thing, really, and it goes back to that Jim Rohn quote, I truly don't believe that we are meant to be on this journey by ourselves. And I believe that you need people who are your peers, but then also people that are a couple years ahead of you always. And I'm always chasing Brian. Brian has been doing this for, a long time. And I've gotten to places where he's been, and then he pivots and does different things. And so there need to be experts that have been where you are that can help you navigate that. And also the power of knowing that you're not alone, because this is, as great as it is to be able to get a massage in the middle of the day, or take vacation whenever you want, or wake up at whatever time, it can be incredibly lonely. We do that work, but we're not going into an office. We don't have a team. It's usually us. And to meet with people on a regular basis, even if it's not revenue generating, to have that sense of community is really important. And I definitely lost that during COVID and after COVID, and suffered a pretty major depressive time, which I talk about a lot on social media. But we need people in our lives. I don't believe we're meant to do this alone.
No, you can't. No, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger's quote, I did this myself. I didn't do it alone is really kind of the essence of what
Absolutely.
every self-employed person in the universe has ever dealt with.
Yeah.
So, all right. You gave a lot of tips there. Normally my next question is, do you have any other tip? But you get like 4 or 5, like one after another. So I think that's, that those are all the things that I think somebody who is starting a business needs to hear. Like just the figure out who you actually are. Don't do this alone. Find somebody to stack and copy. I mean, that's the basics of it. And then realize no matter how good it is, it's going to get worse. And no matter how bad it is, it's going to get better. I think 100%. You get those things. Oh, and then the big, we teach IR theory, but just the idea that your failure as a salesperson is not your failure as a human.
And that, going back to that coffee shop that we owned in Poland, we had it for a year, and it was, starting a coffee shop in a post-communistic country when your wife looks like she's 17 after you got married and I didn't speak the language. It was a disaster on so many levels. But what that taught me was, to your point, failure is an event. It's not a defining characteristic. The coffee shop was a failure. We are not failures. So that's a big one. And then the other tip I would say, and I mean this with sincerity and respect, is that you're not that special. I think people think sometimes like, the world has never seen the thing that I'm going to do. Well, in reality, the world's probably seen that thing a couple of 100 times. You just don't know about it. And that's not to dampen the fire that you have to go do this thing, but just to understand that the world's not going to be as impressed with you as you are of yourself, especially at the beginning.
Well, you say especially at the beginning. I would say at any point.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. I agree with that.
You've got kids, so you've dealt with teenagers, right? They
no
firmly believe
experience in the world.
Yeah, they firmly believe the world revolves around them, which it doesn't. But they are also willing to let everybody around them know without any if I need to know whether or not something matches, I don't go to my wife. I go to my teenage daughter because she has no filter of criticism.
None.
So, yeah.
None. My daughter tells me all the time when I say things, she's like, "Dad, you're fried." And I'm like, I thought that was a foregone conclusion. I thought that was a baseline that we're operating from. I am.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah. It's what I got. It's what I got.
That's exactly right.
So, all right. Well, I think, we're 23 minutes in. Good spot to wrap up. Before we go, I want to remind everybody you can learn more about Jason and some of the ways to contact him over in the show notes at Default Profitable. If you're listening, there's 3 ways you can help us. Leave a review, hit subscribe, share an episode. Jason, thanks for being a great guest. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And for everybody listening, we'll be back next week. Until then, stay focused, keep working, stay profitable.